So in this video, I'm going to go over sentence fragment. So what is a sentence fragment? A sentence fragment is an incomplete idea or incomplete thought. Another name for a sentence fragment are dependent clauses or subordinate clauses. A sentence fragment is always missing either a subject, verb, or object, and a sentence fragment does not express a complete idea. So a complete sentence always has a subject, a verb, and an object. But then a sentence fragment here, you notice it's missing a subject. Runs in a marathon. Who runs in the marathon? Jan runs in the marathon. So when you have a complete sentence, you have a complete thought. When you have a sentence fragment, you have an incomplete thought, like runs in a marathon. Paul, who is French, lives in Paris. So that's a complete thought, complete sentence. It's a complex sentence because you have an independent clause, Paul lives in Paris. Then you have a dependent clause, who is French. So Paul, who is French, lives in Paris. So you have your independent clause, Paul lives in Paris, a dependent clause, who lives in French. Put the two together and that becomes a complex sentence. Sentence fragment, who lives in Paris, is an incomplete thought, so that's a sentence fragment. We don't want to have sentence fragments in our essays or we lose points for incorrect grammar. While John walks his dog, he chews gum. This is a complete sentence. This is a complete thought. This is a complex sentence, so it's correct. If I simply just say, while John walks his dog, that is not a complete sentence. That is a dependent clause and it is incorrect. It is a sentence fragment. So a sentence fragment means it's just part of a sentence. It's not the whole sentence. So here you have another, originally a Mexican worker. This is not a complete sentence because it's missing a subject and a verb. Another example of a sentence fragment, showing support for workers and for Hispanic empowerment based on grassroots organizing. This is the subject of this whole thing is the subject of a sentence, so it's missing a verb and an object. So this is an example of a sentence fragment that appears on your quiz. That's why I have all of this bolded, because on the quiz they'll ask you, originally a Mexican worker, is that a complete sentence or is that a sentence fragment, which is an incomplete sentence? So you have to know that originally a Mexican worker is not complete. Showing support for Hispanic empowerment is not complete. All sentence fragments, which was adopted as the 2008 campaign slogan of Barack Obama. Okay, so what happened to the rest of the sentence? Whenever you have a sentence that starts with which is a subordinating conjunction. So when you have a sentence that starts with a subordinating conjunction, you know right away this is a sentence fragment. Where is the rest of the sentence? So what was adopted as the 2008 campaign? What was that campaign slogan? So you're missing the rest of the thought. So this becomes an example of a sentence fragment. A portrait of Cesar Chavez in the National Portrait Gallery. Okay, well, what about the portrait? Why are we talking about this painting? Okay, what makes that important? So this is also an incomplete thought, a sentence fragment, because it lacks a verb and an object. So therefore, subordinate clauses are fragments, and sentence fragments are dependent clauses. Subordinate clauses and incomplete ideas. So dependent clauses are also sentence fragments. To avoid sentence fragments, each sentence should have a subject, a verb, and a complete idea. So you have to have Jan, subject, runs, verb, a marathon, object. So subject, verb, object is a complete idea, independent clause, which equals correct grammar. Here is another example of a complete sentence. It's not a sentence fragment. So this shows up on your quiz. The American Friends Service Committee, subject, nominated, verb, Chavez 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize, object, subject, verb, object. This is a simple sentence, which is not a sentence fragment, is a complete thought, is a complete sentence, and it's an independent sentence. And so here is another complete thought, and another correct sentence. After Chavez's death, prepositional phrase, he, subject, became, verb, a major historical icon for the Latino community, object. So prepositional phrase, subject, verb, object equals a sentence, simple sentence. So we add sentence variety to our essay by having different kinds of independent clauses. In English, there are three kinds of sentences: simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, and compound complex sentence. Actually, there are four kinds of sentences. When we want sentence variety, then we have some simple sentences, some compound sentences, and some complex sentences. So a simple sentence: Jan runs in a marathon. Subject, verb, object. A compound sentence: John is a couch potato. Comma, coordinating conjunction. Jan likes to go outside to run marathons. So subject, verb, object, coordinating conjunction, but you have your comma there, subject, verb, object. A complex sentence: John, who is a couch potato, likes to watch television. So John likes to watch television is the independent clause, and then the dependent clause, who is a couch potato. When you put a dependent clause and an independent clause together, you have a complex sentence. Then when you have a compound complex sentence is when you put a compound sentence together with a complex sentence. John, who is a couch potato, likes to watch TV, but Jan, who likes to go outside, likes to run marathons. So we add sentence variety by having simple, compound, and complex sentences in our essay. We avoid having too many simple sentences in a row because that makes our essay sound too choppy. We definitely don't want sentence fragments in our essays, and we do not add sentence fragments to add sentence variety in our essay because sentence fragments do not express complete thoughts. Other names for sentence fragments are subordinate clauses, dependent clauses, incomplete ideas, and incomplete thoughts. Therefore, a subordinating conjunction or a dependent clause is a sentence fragment. Google for yourself a list of subordinating conjunctions to help you make complex sentences. We can use relative clauses or if you have simple sentences. So in other words, you can bring simple sentences that all have the same subject together by using a subordinating conjunction. What does that mean? That means if I say something like, Jan went shopping, Jan lives in France, or Jan buys clothes, Jan, how boring. So we want to combine those sentences by saying, Jan, who lives in France, loves to buy clothes. Instead of just saying Jan loves to buy clothes and Jan lives in France, you can use a relative clause to combine, use who to combine the two sentences, Jan lives in France and Jan loves to buy clothes. So when you have Jan, that's the time to use the relative clause and put the two together. What are gerunds? Normally when we use verbs, I would say, I am going shopping. Then the ing words are verbs. Jack went shopping with his wife. So went shopping is a progressive verb. But when we use that progressive verb, ing, or shopping, as a noun or subject, it's no longer a verb, it's called a gerund. And so an example of a gerund is, shopping is a fun activity on a Saturday afternoon. So here, the ing word shopping is no longer a verb, it is now a subject. And when you use the ing word as a noun, as a subject or object, it's known as a gerund. When you use a gerund as the subject of a sentence, you always have to have a singular verb. Shopping is a fun activity. You don't say shopping are a fun activity. So the ing word, it always takes a singular verb in subject-verb agreement. Another example, so a gerund can be used as a subject. Shopping is a fun activity. And a gerund can also be used as an object. I like to go shopping. Okay, so objects always come after the verb. Since gerunds are used as nouns, gerunds can never be used, what happened to the R here? Can never be used as a verb. So for subject-verb agreement, gerund subjects are always singular. So you don't say shopping are fun, you say shopping is fun. What is an infinitive? An infinitive is the root form of the verb. So examples of infinitives include to go, to swim, to speak, to eat, to sleep. Infinitives, just like gerunds, can be used as subjects and objects in a sentence. In other words, gerunds, infinitives can be used as a noun. So here is an infinitive as a subject. To eat early and to go to bed early makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I believe that was Benjamin Franklin who said that. So to eat early and to go to bed early, these are both infinitive subjects. So here you have an infinitive used as a subject. Now infinitive can be used as an object. I like to eat early and go to bed early to be healthy. So I is the subject, like is the verb. To eat early and to go to bed early are objects. So here you have the infinitive as an object. So to review, gerunds and infinitives are verb-like structures used as nouns. Gerunds and infinitives cannot be the main verbs in a sentence. So here is a summary of your quiz, week 4 quiz lesson. It is false to think that a sentence fragment has a subject, a verb, and expresses a complete thought, because a sentence fragment is usually missing a subject, verb, and does not express a complete idea. So false, a sentence fragment expresses a complete idea and has a subject and a verb. If you have sentence fragments in your paper, you will get points off your paper. It's not a good idea to have sentence fragments. Therefore, false sentence fragments are not a good way to add variety to your writing. Actually, if you have a lot of sentence fragments in your business writing, your boss will think you are very uneducated. Perhaps, indeed, it is very true that a subordinate conjunction is a sentence fragment. Any dependent clause that starts with a subordinate conjunction is a fragment. True. Gerunds and infinitives look like verbs and are not main verbs in a sentence. Gerunds and infinitives are verb-like constructions that act like nouns. Shopping is a gerund and acts like a noun, not a verb. To avoid sentence fragments, each sentence should be a complete idea and should have a subject and a verb. That's true. Originally, a Mexican-American farm worker is an example of a sentence fragment because it lacks a verb and an object and does not express a complete idea. Other examples of sentence fragments include a portrait of Chavez in the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C., or which was adopted as 2008 campaign slogan of Barack Obama, is also a sentence fragment because both of these sentences do not express a complete idea. The American Friends Service Committee nominated Chavez 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is an example of a complete sentence because here you have a subject, a verb, and an object. So the American Friends Committee, subject, nominated, verb, Chavez, object. So subject, verb, object, so therefore this is a complete sentence. After Chavez's death, prepositional phrase, he, subject, became, verb, a major historical icon for the Latino community. So subject, verb, object. So this sentence is also an example of a complete sentence because it has a subject, a verb, and an object and completes and expresses a complete thought. It has a subject, verb, and object and expresses a complete thought. So Chavez, his life to improving the treatment, pay, and working conditions for farm workers. That is not a complete sentence because here you have subject and object. Where is your verb? So this is an example of a sentence fragment because it's missing the verb devoted. So if I wanted to correct this sentence, I would say Chavez devoted his life to improving the treatment, pay, and working conditions for farm workers. So this is a sentence fragment because it's missing a verb. So this is so if it's missing the verb devoted, so in order for this sentence to be complete, you have to put in the verb devoted. Then you would have subject, verb, object, and then it would be a complete sentence. So that is a sentence fragment, an incomplete sentence, and therefore you don't want to write like that in your essay because then you would lose points. That is the end of your week 4 quiz on sentence fragments. If you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime.